guys, welcome to SheKnowsArsenal. My name is Jessica. I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at JessinoTweets and at SheKnowsArsenal. Welcome to another transfer talk. We're going to be going through all the most recent Arsenal news and transfer news in this January transfer window. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel. We will be discussing mostly Joao Felix in this episode because there's been some, not really an update, but just some more information revealed. So we'll talk about that as well as a little bit of Mudryk, and I just want to get your guys' thoughts and opinions on what's been going on. Chelsea are useless and did not help us in this title race whatsoever. Just expected them to at least nick a point. They did not, and City beat Chelsea yesterday 1-0. And a lot of the narrative going around on Twitter post that game was that Manchester City had the ability to go on into their bench or look at their squad and at halftime make 4 huge subs that inevitably were the reason why they were able to get the win, the 3 points away from home at Chelsea. And they brought on Jack Grealish. They brought on, who else did they bring on? Who else did they bring on, guys? I just know it was Jack Grealish. I think Mahrez came on as well. They made a couple of different substitutions, and Pep was able to change things. And I remember that kind of the narrative around the Newcastle game, beyond Arteta's antics, were the reason why the team couldn't cope with Newcastle bullshit, was that Arsenal didn't have anybody to come on and change the game. And I think that's more accurate of a reason why Arsenal may or may not win the title, is because when you look at a team like Manchester City, who are able to, in big matches, change the game with hundreds of millions of pounds worth of talent, and Arsenal don't have a single player to bring on, it does kind of bring some reality to the situation in terms of Arsenal do not have the depth and quality to really push Manchester City if we don't have, if we're not scoring the goals or we need to change something up. And I think Arteta's made it pretty clear that he needs reinforcements. This is not an Arteta issue. I know people try to make everything an Arteta issue, but it is not. He is doing the best with what he's got, and Arsenal cannot think that they're going to compete in 3 different competitions until the end of the season with what they have. And so we're in a really interesting moment where we're at the January transfer window. We've been told multiple times by millions of different sources that the Cronkies are ready to invest and push for the title and back Mikel Arteta. Will Arsenal compromise their bottom line to get that done? We spoke about that yesterday. I don't think so. I think there will always be an element of let's not get our pants pulled down. And I think that that's important. But nevertheless, the stark reality of we just don't have the bench. And we don't have the same level of quality on the bench as most teams. Like, if you just take Manchester City out and look at, the next, let's say the next, couple of teams, Manchester United do have strength and depth. They do have the ability to bring on different types of players and bring on talented players. Some of them are not as good as others, but we don't have any options that we feel comfortable with beyond Emile Smith-Rowe, Tomiyasu, and Kieran Tierney. Beyond those 3, I think there's, and Nketiah at this point, I think there's huge questions around whether or not we'd feel confident in the likes of Reece Nelson, Marquinhos, Sambi, Vieira, these players coming in to do a job in a very difficult circumstance. And so, or El Neni, if you feel comfortable with him, fair enough. But you know what I mean? And so, yeah, they need to get out there and get it done. It will be the reason why we don't win the title, for sure. It definitely will be it. Because in these difficult matches, against the smaller teams, we can pretty much just play our starting 11 or a variation of the starting 11, meaning take a couple of pieces out. Maybe Vieira starts instead of Odegaard, or, Tomiyasu starts instead of Ben White, or Tierney starts in front of Zinchenko, and kind of get the same result. But against the top teams, the top 5 teams beyond us, like excluding us from the big 6. It's going to be tough. And so, yeah, they need to get into that transfer window and make things happen. I just wonder whether or not we're going to get it done, because we know Arsenal will walk away from deals if they don't feel like they're getting value for money, but they need to have backups just in case it doesn't work out, So that's kind of where I'm at with that before we get into the Joao Felix stuff. Crispy Rice says, good morning. Good morning to you as well. It is afternoon here, but it doesn't really matter, right? Zach 10 says, good afternoon, folks. Good afternoon to you as well. Football Tears, Arsenal. He is going to Arsenal. Yeah. Christopher says, hello. Hello to you as well. Darren says City squad cost over £1 billion, the most expensive squad ever assembled in the history of football. No one can compete with that. I get what you're saying, but knowing that that's the reality there, we still have to strive to become a team that can fight for titles and maintain a challenge and compete in multiple competitions at once. And I think even if you take City out of that, we don't have a squad that can do that. So just even taking City out and knowing that they'll probably win most titles, they'll be able to sustain their levels more than we can. We still need to strive to do more. We need to get closer to them, even if it's unobtainable to get that close to them, if that makes sense. Lucas says, we will not sign Mudryk unless he requests a transfer and force it. Sanjeev says, Arsenal don't have any special talented player to make them champion. City will be champion for sure. I mean, I kind of hear what you're saying, but at the same time, Arsenal have been able to get to where they are now without having any special players. I still think that it's kind of like Arsenal don't get any respect for their players. Like, none of our players get any respect. They're not special. They don't have any special qualities. They're average. Then why are they 5 points clear of the champions? If the champions have so much quality and so many special players, why is it that they're not tearing every team apart, getting every single point, and why are we not below them to this point? I think that it's a strange narrative that Arsenal, one, don't have any special talented players. We do. They're just younger and didn't cost as much as Manchester City's players. But beyond that, a team that has good tactics, a good system, the camaraderie, the togetherness, and the fight and the drive, and the fitness to go all the way, can't also be champions. Like, I find that to be a little bit strange, but yeah, I kind of get what you're saying, but I don't think it's a matter of special talented players. I think you have to have the perfect player for your system. And whether it's a special talented player or just a player that fits your system, that's what you need to get it over the line. I don't really buy into we need to buy because so Saka's not special talented, like Martinelli's not special talented, Saliba's not special talented, like, come on. I don't really believe in that, but I get kind of what you're saying, but like it buys into that whole narrative that like our players are not as good as other players, and if they were not, they wouldn't be where they are. And furthermore, if they're not that good and they're not talented, then that actually speaks more to Mikel Arteta's coaching ability, because basically what you're saying is he coaching up a bunch of average players or just okay players or players that are not special in any way. So I don't know. Being Yuki says we don't need their respect for our players. We'll just appreciate what we have. Remember, most of our players haven't reached their peak yet. Yeah, no, I hear that. I just feel like on an Arsenal stream, I'm definitely going to back our team and say that I think some of our players do have super talent and are special. They just don't get the same respect or, backing or plaudits or respect as like players that cost a lot, have shy, because Saka came out of our academy. If he was at Dortmund and then, at 21 years old was doing what he's doing in the Premier League now, people would want him and would be saying he needs to come to the Premier League and he would cost 100 million. It's just the fact that he came from our academy that people don't think he's special talented. So weird. It's like literally as soon as you put on an Arsenal kit, it's like, are they really that good? Like, come on. But beyond that, I do think that Felix is a very talented player. So we will talk about kind of what's been said in the media about our interest in him, as well as Manchester United's interest, and kind of talk about where we think the chips may lie and how everything will kind of pan out in terms of those links. So make sure you guys like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let me go ahead and pull this up. So essentially, Sam Dean, who works for the Telegraph, put out an article today saying Arsenal will not be dragged into a bidding war with Chelsea over Mudryk and remain confident that the 22-year-old wants to join them. AFC won't go over their valuation of the player. Alongside Mudryk pursuit, they are also stepping up their interest in Joao Felix. Now, there's nothing really concrete or specific about what that means, stepping up your interest. But Fabrizio Romano has also issued an update on George Mendes speaking to Atletico. I thought it was so funny that Simeone is upset about the way things are going with Joao Felix and it hasn't been taken care of yet. We'll speak to your board because they're the ones who have an astronomical loan fee for Joao Felix. Doesn't have anything to do with the teams that want to bring him in. But Fabrizio Romano was basically saying that George Mendes has spoken to Atletico and that I think he wants to get an idea around what the loan fee could look like. Is there wiggle room? Can it come down? To our knowledge so far, it started off at 22 million for a loan fee. And then I know I saw something that said 15. That's still really, really expensive, especially because you have to pay all of his wages for 6 months. And so he wants to get an idea of what the loan fee could be should Manchester United or Arsenal be really interested in bringing him in. Both teams have interest in him. Arsenal is said to have told George Mendes that he's a concrete option for Arsenal, and Manchester United have also said that they're very, very interested in him as well. We know that with Ronaldo leaving, there is a very open and obvious spot within the squad for Joao Felix to land at Manchester United. So that is definitely something that stands out to me in terms of who could potentially get him. Once Jesus comes back, I do think that then we're seeing more rotation. We're seeing this and that. At Manchester United, he's not going to really be sitting there waiting for somebody to come in. He goes right in and starts. The team becomes, Rashford on the left, Joao Felix through the middle, and Antony on the right or whatever. And that's your starting front three. Where with Arsenal, I do think that because we gave Jesus the number 9 and Arteta really trusts him, that will change the role from Felix, in certain scenarios. Not to say that he can't start games. I think he would start games and he would push certain players from their positions. But I think there's a very obvious spot for Joao Felix where for us, once Jesus comes back, it's okay, so what's going to happen? And I think a player that's already been in a situation where he wasn't that sure on what his role was or playing style and stuff like that will want real clarity on what his role is. And also want to know that he's a nailed on starter, at least for 6 months. So it's one of those where I do see that that's probably an aspect of where Man United can offer him that right off the bat, where I'm not sure Arsenal would say yeah, 100% you're gonna start, you know what I mean? Denny says exactly. Felix is more versatile up front. Shin says I want Felix more than Mudryk. Crispy Rice says I want Felix though. It makes that front three interchangeable. And what we saw, and I've been saying this for a while, I do think we need 2 forwards, not 1. 1 is the bare minimum for this window. But when I look at other teams that are in the Champions League, are fighting on multiple fronts, are able to sustain a level of quality throughout the season and it doesn't dip as much as it does for us, they have 4 or 5 high quality players. And we're always worried about, well, what if they get upset because they're not playing? Well, if their response is not, well, I'm going to work harder to try to get a starting spot, then they don't belong at Arsenal. I've never seen a strong Arsenal side that didn't have competition for places and a couple of top players that sit on the bench sometimes. And so I do think we're a little bit uncomfortable by it. It's I'd feel more comfortable if the backup was just a backup. But to be honest, Arsenal need 2 attackers, high quality attackers, 1 winger, maybe and a player that can play across the front three. And so whether it's Felix, Mudryk, or another player, Ferran Torres or Jesper Lindstrom, it's not just one, it's two. We need two. And so this might just be the start, but I think there's also like a level of like getting it through our heads that like there's going to be some players that we really like that may not start every single game, and it might be some of the players that we love right now. Do you know what I mean? And it doesn't matter, you know what I mean? Because if we're able to play in the FA Cup and not get booted out by a really crappy League One team or something like that, if we're able to go into a Champions League group stage and just kind of walk all over the opponents because we have good quality in numbers, it doesn't matter. And strength in depth is kind of like the next part of the equation. And I'm seeing there's like a little bit of like, but what happens to Saka? What happens to Martinelli? They fight for their spots. Like, that's what happens. ZFB says we need both Felix and Mudryk in addition to Jesus and Smith Rowe plus Nelson coming back. There is the league, Europa League, and possibly FA Cup to play for in these 6 months, enough games for all. And to be quite honest, you guys, I don't see Mikel Arteta doing any sort of throwing competitions in order to maintain the title race. I don't see it. I think Arteta believes, like most Arsenal fans, that have been around for a while, I think that, yeah, you prioritize somewhat, but you don't throw competitions to get out of them so that you don't have to compete on all fronts. You need to build a squad that can do it. This is Arsenal. This isn't Leicester. Do you know what I mean? And so if it comes down to it, we will play strong squads in every single competition, but whether or not this squad is strong enough, I think we know the answer. So we just, is Arsenal need more players. And it's just a shame because, we're only probably going to get one or two. You know what I mean? So it needs to really bring the quality up. And I think that's where like Mudryk and Joao Felix make more sense than some of these stopgappy players or younger players. We don't really need them. Even though Joao Felix and Mudryk are younger, I do think that they offer a level of quality that some of our links have not. Leif says, reporters say Mudryk has Ballon d'Or potential, and I think we can sign Felix in the summer, but Mudryk would probably be signed by Chelsea if we wait until the summer. Maybe, and maybe he thinks, Arsenal are not that serious about me if they're not willing to, put their money where their mouth is. There's still, I still think with Mudryk, even though I feel confident that he wants to come to Arsenal, I do think that things can change really quickly if, the message is Arsenal are not willing to pay to get you out of there. You know what I mean? But Chelsea is. Does that mean that Chelsea is more serious about him? In a young player's mind, it might feel that way. So yeah. But in terms of Joao Felix, it looks like there's two teams that are really interested in him, Arsenal and Manchester United. There's an obvious spot for Joao Felix, in the center of their front line. And so you can look at that. There's also the level of wages that Manchester United are always comfortable paying. Arsenal, maybe not so. And I think it would really test the Cronkies and how serious they are to push for somebody like Joao Felix, because it's not just the high loan fee and the wages. It's the buy option that's going to come in the summer that's going to be 80 million. So are they willing to do that as well? After spending a lot last summer, after maybe even buying Mudryk. So there's a lot of steps here, but I think we'll know a lot more about the Cronkies and Edu at the end of this window. Do you know what I mean? Because this is unprecedented. We have not been in the midst of a title race and the Cronkies need to spend the money. And we saw what they did when we were in a top four race, even though maybe they felt like it was the best for the long run. I do think that you can make an argument that like, yeah, well, we could have been in the Champions League this season and we would have been able to look at better players in the summer, if that makes sense. Ali A says, just at some point, you're going to have to break the wage structure when you get to the big time it comes. I agree. And I don't think we got the wage bill down to keep it down. I think you get the wage bill down so that you can bring in top players and be able to afford to pay them. And you never really talk about your wage structure unless things are going wrong. And that's where recruitment comes in. And I think if you had to give it a percentage, since it's been Arteta and Adu kind of running everything, I would say that they're probably at like an 85% success rate in terms of our transfers. I can only really think of a handful that are either, completely 100% didn't work. And that's also in terms of like contract renewals and stuff like that. And also like, players that cost a lot, players that cost a little. I think you could say it was probably 85% success rate. They've gotten some things wrong, but they've gotten things mostly right. And so if you feel like your recruitment is really good and you know what type of player you need, then you shouldn't be that afraid to spend the money. But it's uncharted territory for this group, this regime. But in the past, we have not done a good job at this. So I can understand why people are maybe like, oh, what the hell? Leaf says, think Chelsea need Mudryk more because now Pulisic came off injured yesterday and Sterling came out injured as well. Mudryk plays both positions, Sterling and Pulisic. I don't think anybody needs winger talent more than Arsenal right now, to be honest. Chelsea need them, but they're also in a totally different space. I know they're building for the future, blah, 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 blah. But nobody needs another winger like Arsenal. We are in a title race. We have just Martinelli and Saka right now. That's it. And so if you're talking about who needs them more, they can still put out a couple of players and we can put out players, but we need more, And so I think we need Mudryk just as much as they do and maybe even more because of where we sit in the table. Gives Super Mick Arteta says, give the kid a chance for F's sake. Okay, so you guys are talking about Eddie Nketiah. Give a kid a chance. He started 3 games with the first team and played well in all of them and scored 2 goals. He's not at Jesus level, but come on now, give him a run. You saw it last year. I would say like with Nketiah, I'll get to the chef, what he said. I'll look it up on Twitter and see if I can find it in a second, Lucas. I see your message there. But in terms of Eddie, like his job is like I think we spoke about this. He's never going to be the answer. Like I think we're all kind of on the same, vibe that he's probably not going to be the answer in terms of he's not going to usurp Jesus. He's not. But can he step in Jesus' absence? Potentially. But how long do we want him there? Because for me, the difference between Jesus and Eddie is that Jesus gives you a certain level of he scares defenses at the top level, where I think Eddie is still a little bit like, okay, this is going to be an easy day out for good defenses. So like Newcastle really dealt with him quite easily. And I think when you're in games like that, you want to have players that really frighten defenses. And I just don't think that we really had that. And so when it comes to the top fixtures, I think that's where Eddie just falls a little bit short. Usually your second option does, but at Arsenal, we're going to need a little bit more. And so I'm not surprised that Arsenal are interested in Joao Felix and Mudryk because of that. Speaking Facts says, Jess, with all due respect, try and know that Felix is already a young world superstar. And these types of players always prefer going to Man United, especially now with the number 7 jersey free at Man U. Man U will sign him. Fair enough. If he does go to Manchester United, I don't think Manchester United is a bad place for him. I think that, in terms of having that ready-made spot available to him, then, he'll go there and it's fair enough. But I'm not going to sit here and act like good players are not going to want to sign for Arsenal. I just think that, with the way that our front line is set up, I think Mudryk kind of fits a little bit easier in because we kind of know exactly what his role is going to be. Whereas Joao Felix is a little bit, so when Jesus comes back, what happens there? So it is what it is. Like, if you feel like any top player, superstar would prefer to go to Manchester United, maybe that is true. I just think that we're in a different era now and Arsenal are competing at a different clip now. People can really see what Arsenal are giving, what Arsenal is about, and young world superstars, I do think will want to come to Arsenal now because of what we're doing. Not to say that they would never want to go to Manchester United, but don't count us out. Don't count us out. But fair enough. There's 160 of you guys in here. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. So yeah, in terms of what Sheth has said. I can never read the first name, but let's see if there's been any clips from that. Excuse me. Yeah, Sky Sports, Sheth says, we're told Arsenal are enjoying positive talks with Atletico over Joao Felix. It's just so up in the air, right? Like, it could go either way at this point. I mean, we're enjoying positive talks. We're intensifying our interest, but like, are we doing this as well and putting it out there to Sky Sports and Ornstein and Fabrizio Romano to show Shakhtar that we're willing to walk away and we don't need them as well? Like, there's also a little bit of gamesmanship here that can be like, you can see it that way as well. And maybe it's mutually beneficial because having another team interested in Joao Felix might push the button for Manchester United. So I do think that there's still an element of that being the reality, is that Arsenal want to show Shakhtar that this is not our only option. We will walk away. There's other players that we're looking at, or we're actually really interested in him and we're pursuing that. Super Mick Arteta says, because our starting striker is injured, how can you not understand this? Okay, you guys are talking about something else, or you guys are talking to each other. Fair enough. Let's see. O'Malley says, Felix always plays as a second striker. He is never a true false nine. Crispy Rice says, I think Arteta believes in Eddie. I've learned to trust him. O'Malley says, look at Felix's heat map. He plays like an 8 or a 10. Yeah, I hear that. I think he does kind of come a little bit deeper and do some playmaking and stuff like that. How I kind of anticipating him playing with us is in through the middle, kind of like how Jesus plays, because the way that we play, that I still feel like maybe this is how I look at it and other people don't look at it this way, but Jesus basically plays like a number 10. I think Odegaard and Jesus are kind of like number 10s that kind of play a little bit behind these, because basically the wingers and xhaka rotate positions through the middle. And so sometimes, and not so much Saka, but in particular, Martinelli and xhaka rotate positions throughout the middle. And so that leaves room for Jesus to kind of float around, receive the ball deeper, play make from the position that he's in, hold up the ball, and Odegaard and him kind of play off of each other doing that role. And so I think that would suit Joao Felix quite well. I mean, he's not necessarily like a traditional number 9 or anything like that, but neither is Jesus. For me, Jesus is a creative forward playing through the middle for Arsenal, and that's all we really require is a creative wing forward. Some of our forwards have different attributes, like Martinelli is a little bit more direct and has a little bit more pace. Saka is a little bit more combination based and has a little bit more creativity maybe, or a little bit more playmaking ability. Jesus has excellent technical, attributes, and also has the pressing and can dribble through anybody. But in the grand scheme and the base of what these players are, they are creative forwards. That's pretty much what it is. And so if that's the requirement, Joao Felix fits that. And it's interesting because it's like, does Mudryk really fit that? But maybe Arteta sees a vision for him that we don't see so much. Super Mick, thank you so much for your super chat. Says, sorry, Jess, people just like to pick on Eddie. I get that. To be honest, I'm not really thinking about Eddie right now. Eddie's doing as well as I probably could have envisioned him doing, scoring 2 goals in 3 games, coming in and looking like he can do the part. And we didn't really have that much drop off until we played against the better sides. And that is a little bit of a worry for me, just because of the teams that we're going to be playing next. But, Eddie has done more than I thought he would do, so I really can't be mad. And I'm really not worried about Eddie. Eddie has signed his contract. He's doing the job and he's doing it to the best of his ability. I'm more worried about who are we bringing in, and so the Eddie stuff, it's like, he's doing as good as he can. I think he's doing as good as he can. And it is what it is. BX Gunner says, stop being sentimental about Eddie. This is about Arsenal pushing for the title. So I think you can do both at one time. Like, I think you can recognize that Eddie is not maybe as poor as some people make him out to seem, and also be like, but it's not really about Eddie because we're trying to push for the title, and beyond Eddie, we need more quality. Like, am I worried about stunting Eddie's growth? Absolutely not. I don't care. The best players will play. And, I put out a tweet the other day that, City can spend this, bring on this amount of, or like hundreds of millions of pounds worth of talent. And some Arsenal fans are worried about youth pathways. And it was kind of like a funny, like, in jest, but I think there's truth in jest sometimes. And I'm going to keep it real. Like, if you're a young player coming through at Arsenal, whether you're from our academy or not, the cream always rises to the top. If you're good enough, you will make it. Period. 100%. I think we spend a lot of time feeling like we have to hold space for players, but I think in the grand scheme, most of our best academy products have just been good enough, and we never held space for them. They just broke through and pushed their way in. They had an opportunity where a player got injured. I forget, for like Ashley Cole, I forget the name, but we know he was our Brazilian fullback. He got injured or something happened with his visa. I don't know. Something like that. Ashley Cole comes in, boom, he's in there. Saka, same thing. Like, had an opportunity. We were desperate. We needed something different. I think this is under Emery, of course. And he took his opportunity and pushed through. And so I don't really believe in this idea that we need to hold space or anything. If you bring in Joao Felix and Mudryk and Eddie can't step up when he gets his opportunities, then it is what it is. But that's not to say that I don't think Eddie's doing a good job at the moment. But would I not bring in other players because Eddie is playing better than I thought he would? No. So yeah, I think that the best players usually show their quality and they just push their way through. And if they don't do that, that's kind of on them, or not really on them, but that's just the reality. Matt G says Arsenal have been charged with FA breach for our game against Newcastle. F you, not you, but whatever. I mean, people were freaking begging for it. It is what it is. We'll pay the little fine. I'm sure Richard Keys is like, oh, thank God they got it, whatever. Who cares? It is what it is. It's just so silly. But whatever. Who cares? Denny says Arsenal charged by the FA. Yeah, exactly. So I think enough people probably talked about it, and enough people dislike Arteta enough for that to have went through. And I think the FA needs to maybe focus a little bit more on the standard of refereeing and not trying to corral people that are calling out the inconsistencies and the ridiculousness of stuff. You know what I mean? Elliot Roberts says, you're referring to Silvinho. Exactly. So that was his name. I couldn't think of it. And I was like, I'm not about to sit here and figure it out because you guys will tell me. But yeah, Silvinho, and Ashley Cole got his opportunity and he took it. And I think that's just what it takes at Arsenal. It's hard to break through as an academy product at Arsenal because Arsenal are a top club, Keenan says, Eddie is a decent backup, decent impact sub that can come on and score a goal. Our rivals would have a World Cup star as their backup in Alvarez. Our rivals have a World Cup star as their backup in Alvarez. Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to. What we kind of been talking about this whole time is that Manchester City's level of depth is something that we probably will never see at Arsenal. But that's not to say that we can't aspire to get to a place where we can compete on all fronts and have bench quality that Arteta feels confident using in a difficult circumstance. He chose not to use anybody because he didn't feel like he had anything. And so although I understand like the reminder of Manchester City and where they are and what they can do, I don't think that really is not really an excuse, but I think it's still something that we should push for, even if it's not Alvarez behind Haaland and Mahrez behind Bernardo Silva and Grealish behind whoever. We can still do better than what we have now, because right now we are at the bottom, and I get why we're there, but it's so obvious that we need backup, when our options. Arteta deserves it as well for what he's been doing with such a thin squad for 2 seasons in a row. Football Capo says Joao Mudryk would make me board the Arteta train. Fair enough. And I know you guys have already kind of said, that on Curtis's channel, Ben Jacobs was already on there. I don't know if he said anything new. So you guys can let me know if he said anything new. I see some of you guys are coming across now, but I feel like we're just kind of like spinning our wheels, waiting, to see what happens with Mudryk, because they want to hold on to him, and here's I think the most I forget who said this. It might have been somebody in the chat the other day, but I thought it was like the smartest way to justify what Shakhtar are doing. Mudryk is their Saka. So why are they're not entitled to sell their Saka to us for peanuts? And I get that it's not exactly the same because Saka has this experience and this experience. But in terms of like where they are, the Ukrainian league, and having somebody of that's from there, Ukrainian born, all that kind of stuff coming through their side, this is their star boy. And so we would not accept Manchester City coming to us for Saka for like 50 million, right? And so I do think that they have a leg to stand on in terms of that, of feeling like, well, we'll just wait. We'll just wait it out. And so we're not going to get Mudryk at the beginning of the window. This is going to drag on. That's the only thing that really worries me, because I know we'll get somebody, but it cannot be January 31st. I feel like there will be drop points. I think even just seeing a new player come into your side can lift a team. I do. I think just seeing new players and knowing that there's new energy can really lift a side. Even if they're just in the stadium, even if they're just on the bench, and I think Arsenal really need that going into the second half. And so the sooner the better, but we're playing some hard teams coming up soon, and so I wonder if Edu's going to be able to get something done, or if he's going to be like, we'll just wait it out and all this kind of stuff. It really is a waiting game, and not a one that I really want to play, because time is not on our side. Because we also saw that getting deals done quick has kind of been the reason why we are where we are. And I'm not saying like if Jesus and them had come in later that we wouldn't be where we are indefinitely. But what I will say is having them ready on the first day of the season I do think has really helped us. And so the sooner you can get players in, the faster that they can get acclimated and adapted to what we're trying to do. I think it benefits you so much. And so January 31st is would be really devastating, because I feel like there would be some drop points there. But ultimately, players just have to come in, and hopefully Edu can get it done quickly. Social Join says we gave them real numbers. City would bring 100 off the bat. We are overpaying Shakhtar already. I agree. That we've already come up to a point that is probably not really reflective of his true value, and is more reflective of the Champions League matches that he has been really good in between the summer window and the January transfer window. And so instead of offering 30, we offer something around 60. That's already an inflated value for somebody of what he's done so far to us. Not what he's worth to them, but what he's worth to us or in the market. And so I understand that. It's just a matter of how long is this going to take? How long are we going to be waiting? Elliot Roberts says, Ben was saying Arsenal are still in the lead with Mudryk negotiations, and Chelsea cannot move until Arsenal pulled out of the deal. Mudryk gives us the advantage. We'll put in a transfer request, buddy. Do some work on your end. If you're desperate to come, you need to put in a transfer request. You need to call up Fabrizio Romano or Ben Jacobs and do a little interview. Do something, because right about now, we need your help. So yeah. Jeff says, don't agree there, though. You pay what you need to get him. He's that good. So, I mean, I get what you're saying, but Arsenal clearly feel like there is a cap there in terms of what they're willing to spend on him, right? And so I do think so. Are you saying that Arsenal are wrong not to go up to the 85 million, even though they have data, statistics, a recruitment department, and everybody that is telling them that this guy is worth this amount? This is also the same recruitment and statistics and data and group of people that got us Odegaard for under 40 million, that got Tomiyasu for a certain amount of money. Like, these are people that have a good track record with us. So are you saying that Arsenal are in the wrong and Edu and whoever else is running this department are in the wrong for not going up to the 85 million because you feel like he's that good? I want to know. Badir says, F the price, just go and get him and win the league. AFC have the funds. It's the fans who care more about the numbers than AFC. Well, no, that's not true because Arsenal are the ones that are saying right now to the media that they have a valuation for the player that they're unwilling to go above. So it's not just the fans that are, thinking about it. It's the club that are also thinking about it, and it's out there about what they're willing to spend. I also think that we have to remember that the Kroenkes, I think it came out the other day that the richest sports owner is Stan Kroenke. And so this is somebody that does have unlimited funds. And if he really wanted to, because we know FFP does not exist. I know that some people will say, well, that has never stopped anybody that we have competed with from spending astronomical amounts of money with barely any, like just a little tap like that. Beyond Chelsea having the transfer ban, I've seen very little regulation in terms of FFP. So the Kroenkes could spend more if they really wanted to. And for me, that's more about like Arsenal fans being together on this aspect of things, even though they're doing a good job now and we don't really want them out now and they have us at the top of the table now. It's what you do in these moments that are really going to show us whether or not we need different ownership and whether we should push for it or just not always give them the benefit of the doubt and kind of always be like, we need more and push for more. Fans have a lot of power, more power than we think. And so I think this is the moment for me where I'm going to see if Kroenke is actually serious. And then when we get into the Champions League, is he going to do that? Or when the Champions League sit back? Or are we going to keep pushing forward? But clearly the club do have a certain number in mind, so they do care about the money, which, so it's not just the fans, to your point. Alex B says, reason Felix is still at Atletico is not a great financial deal, 20 million for 6 months, and would have to negotiate another 80 million plus the summer for permanent. Maximius says, if the scouts deem that 60 plus million is what he is max worth, then why go beyond it? That's kind of the point here is, should they just do it because we need to win the league, or should they stick to their guns because that is what he's valued at? I don't see very many clubs going over the valuation of players, not willy-nilly, and that's the other point, is that we haven't really been overspending or spending stupidly lately. So maybe we do have the wiggle room to do a little bit more because this player is really good. Or do Arsenal need to still build up that respect in the marketplace and amongst their peers and say, we're not going to get our pants pulled down? It's really a lot of chess being played right now, to be honest. Boy says, at this point, I actually want Chelsea to sign Mudryk. Would do us a favor, like Liverpool taking Gakpo off of the market. I don't know about all that. Super Mick Arteta says, thank you so much for your super chat. Says, Jess, the clubs use people like Romano to drive fees. Fair enough. Kevy Kev says, short term is risky, but long term, we could be serial winners competing for major trophies every season. Yeah, I mean, but I also think I want to put this out here and also remind the 255 of you guys that are in here, which is amazing. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, is that Arsenal did not anticipate being here so quickly. I think this season was definitely about finishing in the top 4, but I don't think they actually thought that they'd be in a position to fight for the title. And just like last season, they didn't anticipate being in a position to fight for top 4. And so we know that they have been very hard on sticking to the plan. And so maybe they don't think spending an extra 20 million on Mudryk is worth it because we weren't supposed to be here in the first place. And so I don't know. Like, I need to see it to believe it. I need to see the players come in to actually believe that we're in a place as a club where we will throw away our long-term plan in order to achieve short-term gain. I haven't really seen it yet. And so even though the media is telling us that the Cronkies are ready to back Mikel Arteta, I'm not sure that I need to see it to believe it, because last season for me was very not, it wasn't like a slap in the face or anything like that. It really was like oh shit. So if we're fighting for something in the middle of the season, they're going to just kind of like, they're not going to go after anything, and I want to see something different. So we'll know more about the Cronkies and Arsenal now more than ever, not building the young squad and buying Sambies and Nunos and Ben White and all this kind of stuff. It's going to be now. This is when we're going to know, because Arsenal should be fighting for titles. And sometimes that does require you to go out in January and bolster a squad. Keenan says Mudryk is solid, but he isn't an 80 million pound player. Super Mick Arteta says Holland is on crazy money at City. That's why you don't just look at transfer fees. The weekly wages is a bigger issue for clubs because it directly impacts our current budget. And that is one of the reasons why I do look at the Joao Felix thing a little bit sideways, because even though I think that Mudryk will be on good money, I don't think he's going to be on 350 bags like Joao Felix will. You know what I mean? And so even though I do think that he's potentially worth it because of how good he could be at Arsenal, do they blow the wage structure for Joao Felix? I don't know, because a lot of people are just focusing on the loan for 6 months. But Arsenal view this as an Odegaard type of situation, which is a look into what the player could be like for us, plus getting them in the summer. 350 bags a week, 80 million pound fee after spending 20 million on a loan is a really big outlay. If Arsenal did that, I would really start to think that they were like the owners were really serious. But you're absolutely right that there are so many different dimensions of a transfer, and often we only look at the fee, but it's also the wages, which has also been a reason that has been spoken about by several different journalists of why we have not pulled the trigger on Tielemans. There was a lot of interest in Tielemans, but Arsenal were not willing to pay whatever astronomical wages he wanted. I think he's already on pretty high wages at Leicester. I think they have 3 or so players that are on 100 and something grand per week. And if he wanted more than that at Arsenal, a player that we're not even sure is up to the level, really, I think is interesting. So Arsenal are definitely holding out and being smart in terms of wages and only giving it out to certain people, because we still have to renew Saka. We still have to renew Saliba. There's going to be other players knocking on the door saying, what about me? But maybe Joao Felix is the type of player that you say, you know what? F the wage structure because he's so good. But you have to look at all of that, not just one thing. Martin N says, I think we 100% need to get Joao Felix. Mudryk, we can wait if the price is not right. It depends, on Mudryk. I don't know if he'll necessarily just be there in the summer waiting for us, because maybe he'll be put off, that we didn't come save him. So I'm not 100% sure about that part, but we 100% need to bring in somebody. You're sold on Joao Felix. A lot of people still want Mudryk. But what do Arsenal want? That's what I want to know. I put out a poll, 287 of you guys voted. I asked who will sign Joao Felix, and 71% said Arsenal and 29% said Manchester United, which is kind of normal for an Arsenal stream, but I think it could go either way at this point. Abscess says United ruined the market by paying $100 million for spinning Antony. Yeah, I think I definitely think that ruined a lot. Jack Grealish, Antony going for 85 to 100 million is definitely just, I mean, come on, like they're nowhere near worth that amount, but it is what it is, and it's whether or not Arsenal are going to play the game or say, you know what, we're not doing it. But I do think Mudryk has the potential to be something really special. And for special talent, sometimes you do push the boat out. But then, I don't know. I don't know. We will know what Arsenal are all about, I think, in this January transfer window. Title on the line, no depth, 2 players. One is going to cost a lot up front, probably not really worth that, but has the ability or the potential to be a world-class player, versus another player where the outlay is going to be substantial. He'll be the highest paid player at the club. He's going to cost a lot in a loan fee, and he's also going to cost a lot after the fact. Which player do they go for? Do they actually go for both? Do they go for something cheaper? Do they let us down? We'll know so much more about Arsenal after this window. Matt G has a question and says, Jess, why do some fans not rate Felix? Is it they haven't seen him play? I don't think it's they haven't seen him play. Maybe they haven't because he hasn't been consistently playing for Atletico. But I think is when you go from Benfica, in a place where people are calling you the next this and generational this and top player that, and then you make a move to a place that doesn't suit your style of play, and you sit there for about 2 or 3 seasons and you just waste away. People do tend to just say that you're a flop and you're not really that good. But I'm telling you, I saw this guy with my own two eyes, and watching him for Portugal, free of Ronaldo, free of Simeone, free of all those things, and being able to just play freely. He is a talented, creative player that would fit perfectly within the ethos of Arsenal. Creative forwards that can do a lot. And I do think he's quality. If I had to choose off of the top of my head, who do I want? No, I don't need to know anything about the money, nothing. Who do I choose? Joao Felix all day long, because I think he's just special talent. But yeah, I don't know. I think some people really haven't seen him play, or knowing that somebody it's almost like if you look at Jack Grealish at who he's been at Manchester City, you might say he's not a good player, but we saw him at Aston Villa, so we know he is. I think sometimes making a move to a place that doesn't necessarily suit you will skew the narrative around your talent, and it just happens sometimes. Crispy Rice says, I'm sure we're in constant communication with Mudryk. It all depends on what he wants. Yeah. And maybe Arsenal do really feel like he won't move unless it's to us. I also saw that Chelsea will not put in a bid for Mudryk unless they have some sort of guarantee that he's willing to join them over us. And I think that's why maybe a bid won't go in. So yeah. Kingura says, would Zhao on loan be a better deal than Mudryk in the winter? I don't know, because I think both of them can help us in so many different ways. I think Joao Felix maybe has more of the ability to hit the ground running, where I'm a little bit like, is Mudryk going to be somebody that needs some adaptation? I think if you ask me who gets us closer to the title, I would say Joao Felix does, because I feel like he will hit the ground running. So I guess I would say Joao is a better deal in the winter, but that we're going to be spending wages wise and fee wise more than we would for Mudryk. And so I do think that, maybe Joao Felix on loan would be a better option in terms of fighting for the title. But I don't really know. Zach 10 says, just if Felix lowered his wages for us, would you rather spend 88 million on Mudryk or Felix? I'd rather spend 88 million on Felix, because I feel like I know what I'm getting. Super Mick says, Felix is a tip-top talent, verging on world-class, and defo better than Mudryk at the moment. But football doesn't work like that always. Something doesn't smell right with Felix, just a hunch. Your hunch may be that, you feel like he's going to go to United. You know what I mean? That might be your hunch. I don't know. George Mendes is also like shopping around and stuff like that. We have two different scenarios here where I don't think I've ever seen anything say indefinitely that Joao Felix wants to come to Arsenal. Maybe he'd be open to it, whatever. And George Mendes is kind of shopping him around and seeing what's the best place for him. I would imagine that if push came to shove and there was an Arsenal and Manchester United, George Mendes would push him towards United. That's what I feel. But we have a player that's like literally dying to come to Arsenal, and that really appeals to me a lot. I like players that are desperate to come to Arsenal. I love it. Like, so that aspect of things makes me feel like, oh, well, Mudryk, maybe, so there's pluses to both players. I'm just saying somebody needs to come in, Alex says, Grealish is a talent. He just moved to a club where he is just a cog in a system, not a star of the show. Social Join says, meh, not super sold on Felix. If a quality player available for 70 M's in the summer, it's worth a punt. Ezekwe says, Joao Felix is on 280K. Do we really see Arsenal paying that? Because I don't. Reports from Spain saying Felix is close to joining United and Arsenal's name being used by Mendes to finish the deal with Man U. Fair enough. And that could very well be the truth of it. That could very well be the truth of it. Because as much as he makes sense for us, he makes more sense for Manchester United because of that open spot with Ronaldo leaving. That makes Rashford be able to play left wing where he's better there. And so for me, it's a little bit like it would make sense. But at the same time, I do think Arsenal holds some interest. Jeff says Mudryk, he is closing down pace. His closing down pace will be incredible and will get us 15 extra 15 goals and we wouldn't get without him. Fair enough. You're really bought into Mudryk, which is cool. Keenan says it's a cold world and Mudryk has to take care of himself. If we don't meet the valuation, he will definitely go to Chelsea. And that's the thing. It's like I don't see him just staying there for the summer. That's I don't really see that. So I do think that we have to get it done now. Arsenal seem confident, but I think he needs to be so dead set on leaving that Shakhtar don't want him around if he's not committed. And then he also has to make it clear that he wants to come to Arsenal so that they'll just kind of deal with us. But they are playing some games and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm surprised nothing has really come out about that meeting, because usually things with Bowley happen like this. And so I'm surprised nothing has really come out with that meeting. But, Ben Jacobs is already kind of saying that, like, it's kind of what we spoke about yesterday is that it may not be Chelsea trying to overtake Arsenal. It's to be available should the deal collapse because they know we're reluctant to meet the valuation. Dallas says, Jess, I'm worried about the meeting between CFC and Shakhtar this weekend. I can see where CFC tells Shakhtar that they will pay the full upfront, no add-ons, like our deal is bid and we are left at the altar. That could happen. The one thing that I did see is that Chelsea are not going to offer way over the market value for Mudryk. They would probably offer something similar to what we've offered, but with more upfront. That's more of the issue. It's not so much about more. It's about more upfront. And so Chelsea could definitely, like you said, offer more upfront, but maybe Arsenal are willing to offer a little bit more upfront. They just don't want to be forced into it for no reason. Arsenal will not get involved in a bidding war. So, it's either deal with us or not, and so I don't know if we're going to get him. I don't know. Zach 10 says, question, if we get Mudryk, doesn't the fact that we are trying to get him and how much we've already bid show that we are committed to building a Man City like ultra talented squad? Yes, I spoke about this yesterday, and I do feel like when we speak about so here's my thing. Like, if I were to come out of this January transfer window and feel like the Cronkies screwed us over, what will have needed to happen is for them not to bring anybody in. So even if they decided not to go for Mudryk, if they still brought in another talented player, but it fit more within our what our budget was, or their valuation and the fee and the valuation for that player kind of met up a little bit easier, that would be fine for me. I just can't accept nobody coming in. That's what I cannot accept. But I do feel like, because we've already spoke about this, Mudryk was worth about 30 million in the last summer when we first were interested in him. We have offered 30 million more based off of the fact that he had a couple of really good Champions League games. And so for Arsenal to spend 62 million on a player with less than 30 appearances in the Ukrainian league is showing that they're willing to spend money on really talented players and push the boat out. What doesn't show that to me is not buying Mudryk and not buying anybody else. That is where I feel like I would be like, damn. So I understand that sometimes you have to go to your next targets because the club that you're trying to play ball with doesn't work, but we still have to bring somebody in. Does that make sense? And so 100%, I do think that it shows a willingness to kind of build that level of squad. We still have a ways to go, obviously, but it would do a lot of to making me feel like the Cronkies are really serious if we did do that. They just can't bring in nobody. They just can't leave Mikel out on the cold. ESR, like a new signing, is not going to do it. It's not. So yeah, Denny says, Mudryk reminds me of Leroy Sané. Arteta loves that type of player. The interesting thing about it is that a lot of people are like, well, does he fit? He's not that. Arteta knows what he's doing with wingers. And Saka and Martinelli are such a good complement to each other. And how they work together with Jesus is just like, mwah. And so if he wants Mudryk, I'm sure he has an idea of how he would develop him into the exact player that we need or are missing. And so I'm not necessarily worried about that. Am I a little bit like adaptation to the league? Yes, I am a little bit like, okay, how long is it going to take him? But in terms of talent identification and Arteta really wanting this player and have already spoken to the player, yeah, I think it's fine. I think it's fine. I also remember when Arteta, phoned up Partey as well. Like, we had a really difficult time with Atletico in that deal. So I know that if they really are interested in a player, have spoken to the player, and the player really wants to come, there's so many different elements. I do think we tend to get those players. But Shakhtar have got to play ball with us a little bit. Ify says, we need to get players like Brighton. Arteta can coach a younger group. I'm tired of this lack of squad depth. So when you say we need to get players like Brighton, are you saying we need to get like Matoma type players to just get them in, or what? What do you mean by Brighton like play? We need to get players like Brighton. Like, what do you mean by that? Can you elaborate a little bit more? Faya says, greetings to you and everyone here. We definitely need to bring in some players, and I don't think we should pay 80 million for Mudryk. Jeff Gold says, Jess, you have to accept that it's better not to get someone we don't need just to bring in the numbers. It's who we want or wait long-termism. Not if it torpedoes our season. No, I think, of course I have to accept it. Like, it's not like I can go up to the Emirates or go to, the offices and knock on Edu's door and say, you need to bring in somebody now. Like, I know I have to accept it. But in terms of do I think that Arsenal are in a position right now where they cannot bring in anybody and it won't have a significant effect on where we finish? Because, okay, we're going to talk about this tomorrow morning, but looking at the fixtures and looking at the points, we are not that far ahead of being dragged into a top 4 race. And so getting that player, getting that boost, getting that depth is definitely a way not only to push for the title, but to make sure that we don't have to think about fighting for top 4. Because as teams get stronger, because all of our rivals are going to bring in players in this January transfer window. Spurs will. We don't have to worry about Chelsea. Liverpool have already brought in somebody. Manchester United, Newcastle will probably buy too. And so we can't just be sitting there like, well, we didn't get our number 1 target, so we can't do anything. How did that work out for us last time? And so I do kind of understand what you're saying is that don't just go for anybody. But that's why when you know you have to bring in somebody, you have to have backup options. That's all I'm really saying. But I hear what you're saying. Don't just bring in anybody. I hear that. Ezequiel says, reports that Mendes want to heal the relationship between him and Man U after Ronaldo incident is negotiating the deal and with Atletico himself. I'm an Arsenal fan, but bringing everybody back to reality, that makes a lot of sense. Terrence Tibbs says, I understood how Arteta wants us to play when you were begging for Arsenal to sack him. You were talking about me. I was never begging Arsenal to sack Mikel Arteta. I did go through a period where I thought that he wasn't good enough and wasn't the right manager. And I think about like 80% of the fan base has. So I don't really like feel any type of way about it. If you're talking about me, I'm fully aware of how I felt about Mikel Arteta. We're kind of beyond that. And like bringing it up now just feels a little bit strange. Like who cares? Oh, not me? Okay. A says, highly unlikely we finish outside of the top 4. 12 wins would get it. So yeah, let's see. Is there anything else we can speak about before we get out of here? Yeah, I don't really care about the FA finding us. It is what it is. People begged and now it happened. So now what? Like, it's fine. So yeah, we'll see. My feeling is that even though I do think that we have true, genuine interest in Joao Felix, our number one option is Mudryk, and that's who we will try to get. I think using Arsenal to get Joao Felix to Manchester United feels like something that's comfy, and that feels like that could be happening. So I wouldn't get like too bought into the Joao Felix stuff unless Manchester United say that they're not going to bring in somebody. But Mudryk is the number one option, and we'll see what happens with that if we get some sort of update on negotiations or whatever. But I also wouldn't anticipate this getting done anytime soon because Shakhtar seem very desperate to like long it out even more to see if some other teams will come in and stuff like that. Make sure you guys like this video and subscribe to the channel. I really enjoyed our last couple of streams. They've been amazing. You guys have been amazing. I like all the differences of opinion and people being cool and calm and collected while we have like a cool conversation about Arsenal. So make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow, we're going to go over the table, the next couple of fixtures, what could happen, how Chelsea didn't help us out at all whatsoever. They literally just like did not want to help us out. And is it going to be a 2-horse race or is it going to be a 4-horse race for the title? We'll talk about that. So see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.